Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks a lot again for your download, for being a part of this show. I am Phil Dark, your host, and I get to do this every week, and I absolutely love doing what I get to do. And so today is no exception. I have a great interview with my friend Jesse Bradley. He is a man that has many hats that he wears and doing some amazing things around the world. He is a pastor up in Seattle, Grace Community Church, as well as an author, a former professional athlete. He played a lot of soccer in his day. He's a leader of many things, an adoption advocate. I could go on and on. I'm gonna let him share a little bit about his life and what he's doing, what God's doing through him. But right now, I also want to just remind you to go and join the Facebook group if you haven't done so already. That's a great place if you want to continue this conversation with me, with some others who are talking about these things. It would be fantastic for you to join there and just connect with me and connect with others there. Also, if you have any questions for me or Paul, if you have questions for Jesse after this interview, just shoot me an email, phil@howsoccerexplainsleadership.com, and we can go from there. So without more on that, I just want to start this conversation that we get to have today with Jesse. Jesse, how you doing, man?
Phil, I'm doing well, and great memories of first meeting you back at Mount Hermon camp. And I know we both love that camp. Hopefully we'll get back there again soon. I know you're still going, but it was great to be, serving there that week, meet you, and then just start the conversation on, orphans, soccer, of course, leadership, lots of great topics. And I just love how you continue to serve orphans around the world, and also just that connection between athletes, orphans, and glad to be here today. Welcome everyone who's a coach, a player, a parent, a kid, someone in the marketplace, leaders. Just love this podcast and the theme.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining. Like you said, I mean, we got to connect at Mount Hermon several years ago, just probably, I think it was in the coffee shop, just in the morning, just having some coffee, and had some great conversations there. And I've no doubt we'll have another great one today. As I always get to do, one of the things I absolutely love about the interviews I get to do are just hearing stories. And, I know you have a very long story that we're not going to get into every little nook and cranny, but would love to just hear, just briefly share your story and how you got to be where you are today, just how soccer has been a big part of that journey. And then we can just kind of chat about some of those things after you tell bring us up to date.
Sounds great, Phil. I grew up in Minnesota, and the first place I lived, it was an apartment in the parking lot of the football stadium. So Golden Gophers, Big Ten. And I saw sports being played at age 3. I told my parents, that's what I want to do when I'm an adult. I want to play sports. So I had that dream of playing professional sports. Basketball was my primary passion. But sometimes in life, your gifts lie in a different area. And I didn't discover that until a little later on, when the soccer coach saw me playing basketball and thought, this is a goalkeeper. And I'm grateful for him. He's a phenomenal coach. He's really a legend. Minnesota United right now in the MLS. His son, Manny Lagos, runs it. His name was Buzz Lagos. And he started training me to be a goalkeeper. And we did well. We won the state title in the Metrodome, 6,000 fans a couple times in high school. I played 3 sports in high school, and also just playing on Olympic development teams with him. And then I played at Dartmouth College on the East Coast, had another great coach. And one of the lessons I think when you're finding soccer teams is just find the best coach, because that coach is going to develop you. That coach is going to see your talent. That coach is going to set the right culture. And Bobby Clark at Dartmouth College is another legend. I mean, he's coached in many countries. He was a goalkeeper in Scotland. He won a national title at Notre Dame. And to be with him and around him for 4 years, I mean, that's a dream come true. Seriously, that continues to have impact in my life today. And we won the Ivy League twice. We made it to the Final 8. We lost to Rutgers. Alexi Lawless was on that team. I feel like it's a game maybe we should have won, but we'll let that go. And moving on. I was able to play after college as well. Played overseas, Scotland, Zimbabwe, for a team there in Bulawayo, the Highlanders. And I thought I'd probably play till I was 35 or 40, because goalkeepers, they have longevity. I mean, physically, they can continue long past when a midfielder usually retires. And so that was my plan. Maybe I'll go into coaching after that, or we'll see, sports psychology. but goalkeeping, it's all I wanted to do. And sometimes in life, it's going one direction and then things shift and it's out of your control and life isn't going that direction anymore. And that's what happened to me. My career tragically ended. I took a prescribed medication to prevent malaria and I took it for a season. It built up toxic levels in my system and major side effects. Physically, the most serious was with my heart. That's tachycardia, which is a racing heartbeat, 160 beats a minute sitting still, atrial flutter, skipping beats, heart murmur. I mean, I was in pain on the left side of my chest day and night and didn't know if I was going to live. I was fighting for my life for a year. It took 10 years to fully recover. And there were also side effects of, anxiety, depression, things I'd never experienced before and were really intense. And all of that ended my career. I believe that sometimes the greatest things in life happen in the worst circumstances. And that was one of the most brutal times of my life, but it's also where so much transformation happened. And we can circle back into some of that, but I'll just say this, being able to play is a gift. Having physical health or energy is a gift. And I thoroughly enjoyed really at all levels. And it's the relationships. When I look back, it's the relationships more than the wins or the losses and the character that you develop as you play sports. And, I'm grateful for the people I played with, the lessons I've learned. It does tie into how I lead today. And it was always a joy. My parents got divorced when I was 7. And at that time, probably the other biggest challenge in my life was that time and then how that affected me in the many years after that. And I really turned to academics and athletics. And sports was one of those really outlets where there was such a pure joy. And when I got on the field, it was like kind of a relief and just so much fun. And I've always found that in playing. I still play today in a men's league. I work with the Sounders, Faith and Family Night, the Seattle Sounders here. Go Sounders, shameless plug. Team's doing well. And my coach, Bobby Clark, in college, his son now, who I knew then was probably in middle school at that point. He's the coach for the Huskies now. So just love, bringing our kids to those games, talking with Jamie and connecting there. And there's a guy from Bellevue College, soccer coach, that comes to our church. There's another professional player, Tacoma Stars, who, is at our church. And I just love that intersection, faith, leadership, sports, soccer, goalkeeping. We could talk for a while. So
yeah,
there's a lot going on.
We absolutely could. Maybe we'll get done with this one. We'll do another one someday too, but do the part 2. But I'd love to hear, as you just talked about there, you're still using a lot of these lessons, right, that you learned. And I know that there are also, I'd like to tie it into some of the things you're doing now too. There are some different ways, you speak, you do different things, but one of the things that I know you talk on is the idea of, mindset and developing habits and purpose. And really that is something I know you learned through soccer and through some of the trials that you faced, right? So can you just talk about that? Just that, those things that I just mentioned?
Right on. Mindset for a goalkeeper, that's at least half the battle. And it's what's going on in between your ears. And that's true if you're in any position in leadership. That's true in life and in your relationships with family. What are you really thinking about? And what are you focusing on? And a couple of things that stood out to me in terms of mindset over the years. One is that the platform continued to get bigger, from high school to college to professional. And what I learned early on, some of those initial games where there's thousands of people there, I found myself kind of on my heels, a little bit intimidated, a little scared, at times almost hoping the ball wouldn't come to me or just feeling unsure. And we all feel insecure. We all have those feelings of being scared. But I found that if I gave into those, it really affected my play. And so I had to intentionally have a different mindset where I wasn't going to let fear prevail. And I was going to go all out. I wasn't going to overthink it. That was something that I kind of have a tendency to easily do, is overthink it. And it's like I had to turn some of that off. And as a goalkeeper, if you make a mistake, you can't dwell on it. You got to delete that. You got to almost hope for the same situation to happen again so that you can, the next time do it right. And I remember the first time in the Metrodome, I was terrified. And the second time we got there, I was like, I'm just not going to let fear win, because we won the game the first time, but fear won against me. And the second time, it's like fear's not going to win.
Yep.
And I believe like we don't have the spirit of timidity, but power and love. And it's like, let's overcome this. And so that was a lot of development for me, is that area of mindset. Another one is how much pressure I put on myself. And what's interesting is that continued to grow. Now, I'm just going to take a brief tangent here, faith-wise, but it's linked. And everyone who's watching, maybe there's many different, beliefs, and I respect, and honor each person. For me, I didn't grow up with faith, didn't grow up believing in God. And I came to know Jesus at Dartmouth College. I wasn't even looking for God. I took a class, Introduction to World Religions. The professor started teaching the Bible. I started reading it, asking 100 questions, kicking the tires. And eventually I'm like, there's so much historical evidence here, I don't think I could ignore it. And I ended up taking that step, and some things shifted, and on the field, things shifted, and the pressure came off me. I started to enjoy the game. I did an independent research project at Dartmouth and worked with athletes to see how much pressure is the right amount of pressure, measured in practice, games, self-reporting. And it's interesting because there's like a bell-shaped curve where if you're not focused enough, then your performance is going to struggle. But if you're too intense and you're focused, on the result in a way that's, kind of paralysis by analysis, or you white knuckle, or you just, this is the biggest game ever, again, your performance declines. So you want to stay in that zone where you're kind of light, you're quick, you're enjoying it, you're relaxed, but you're anticipating stuff. And I think that's when you play at your best. And what I noticed for me in terms of mindset is that when I started to pray with other athletes for the games, like it just changed the way I approached the game. All of a sudden, soccer didn't mean everything is important, but it was like I could just play at a different level. And so that was a mindset thing for me, is learning how to land it in that zone. One other mindset piece that I'll mention is, what do you do with the thoughts that come into your thinking during the day? They're coming in all the time for all of us. That first thought comes in. It might be a thought that's destructive. It might be a thought that's not true. It might be a thought that's selfish. It might be a thought that's impure. Whatever those thoughts are, they come into our minds. And what are you going to do with that thought? And you don't have to harbor it or entertain it. You don't have to welcome it, dwell on it. In fact, you can reject it if it's not good, and then intentionally choose something else. And that's what I had to do in the nets. Like, if I made a terrible play, I can't dwell on that. That can't stay in there. Like, I got to reject that and then come back to that readiness where the next play comes, and I'm not hanging my head. I'm not sitting there in shame. It's like, game on, let's go. And to be able to do that quickly on the field, it was almost like a discipline that translated well off the field. And when I was sick and recovering, I had all kinds of thoughts that would come in that were depressing, discouraging, no hope, anxiety. And I had to just say, no, that doesn't belong here. So my mind doesn't go in the ditch. And I'm going to intentionally choose something that's true, that's right, that's good, that's encouraging. And then that's the thought I'm going to land on. And just like a goalkeeper keeps the ball out of the net, I had to keep those thoughts out of my zone, because thoughts are powerful, and renewing the mind, that is what brings life into our relationships, our attitude. And I believe that greatest battle is so often between the ears. So those are some mindset things in leadership and sports, faith, every day as I think through things. It's amazing when you stop and pay attention to your thoughts, how many dozens of thoughts we have every day that just aren't right. And again, no guilt in that, but we just have to be actively leading our mind so that we don't end up, in a dark place, because it's easy to go there. And I've just seen so much fruit from that one discipline.
Absolutely. I mean, you just think about our parenting, right? I mean, how many lies are our kids listening to that just simply are not true, whether it's at school because they're projecting what others are thinking about them, or, as we talk about as Christians, lies from the enemy about who we are, right? And just understanding what that looks like. You talked about in the goalie just yesterday, I was coaching university and a keeper, and I was warming her up at halftime, and she just looked at me, she goes, "I'm really nervous." And I said, "Have you played this before?" She goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Have you played keeper before?" She She goes, yeah. I said, have you played in a game before? She says, yeah. I said, just go do that. Right.
Yeah.
It's what you're talking about, right? This
Yeah.
idea of to remind ourselves that we have the knowledge, we have the ability, we have, if, or else we wouldn't be there, right? You wouldn't be in college playing if you didn't have that somewhere in you, right?
Yeah.
Now, you might not be
Yeah.
the best in the world, you might not be whatever, but to go out and if you play tight, if you play worried, if you play in fear, you will be playing worse. And she
Yeah.
went out there and had a great half.
Yeah.
But if she would have gone out like thinking, I go, you're thinking way too much.
Yes.
There is that sweet spot of you got to
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
but not be thinking about each move and what you're going to do. Be thinking about, okay, where is this ball going to go before you get it? But as you get that ball, you just play.
Yeah.
Right? What does that look like? And I think there's so many. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that as far as in your current, role as a pastor, as a leader, and of a lot of different things. How does that play out there as far as that, even talking about developing habits and muscle memory? And, if we do things enough, they will become part of just who we are. And when we're making decisions, if we make decisions enough with our values and our core beliefs, they will just, those decisions will be made, right? What do you think about that?
That's right. I love how you coached her. I mean, that's what a good coach does. You bring out the best in your players, and you know who you need to calm down. You know who you need to kind of get cranked up for the
Right.
games. And you know who needs to be held accountable, and you know who needs to be encouraged. And I remember that as a goalkeeper, there was 10 different personalities. I'm talking to them the whole game, and I've got to know them and know what makes them tick and bring out the best. And that's true in parenting. It's like, how do you bring out the best in your kids? And a timely word can make all the difference. I remember when my coach would pull me aside and say something. I remember before Yale, he knew like this was a game, Ivy League titles on the line. He knew we were going to be visitors. He knew we were going to be facing just really an onslaught all game. And he was just like, this is your game. This is your game right here. And I just tell you, he had confidence in me. He knew the moment. And like that affirmation right there. I mean, we ended up winning 1-0. We kind of stole the game and we got the Ivy League title, and just pulling someone aside, recognizing what they need, that's powerful. And I think that, we don't want to end up in places where we either have inflated views of ourselves or deflated. And it's so easy to be deflated, kind of be down on, well, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I can't come through today. Maybe I'm just off. I'm probably gonna let the team down. I made this mistake before. Or you can get inflated and think like, yeah, I'm the best. This team revolves around me. Like, watch me go. And sometimes when you win a championship, what I saw in my experience is the toughest year was the year after that, because the team's kind of inflated and it's easy to get complacent and you lose some of that hunger. And you kind of have blind spots on some of the weaknesses of the team because you think, yeah, we just won the ring, and the year after the championship, it was often a letdown. So, trying to balance that out and just stay healthy view of self, healthy view of team. And that's one that's, I think, humble and hungry, realistic, and a lot of collaboration, really working well together.
Yeah. And how does that play out in the real world, so to speak, outside the lines, right? As you're, whether you're, leading a staff, right? And as you have people on your team now, right, at the church or in other areas, what's the analogy we have for as we're living today?
Yeah. Soccer is all about collaboration. And that's the one thing that carries over. And the longer I'm doing leadership, the more I see it's about collaboration. And I mean, in preschool, you say, does the person play well with others? But man, that's true your entire life. How do you really do as a team player in the different settings? And so in Seattle, for example, when I got here, we started something where we gathered together, churches and ministries. Now there's about 100 churches and ministries. And it's just so exciting to do stuff together. You kind of break the norm. If the norm is, sadly, sometimes in the Christian world, it's competition or isolation. It's like, no, we just had an event called Serve Our City. And we brought together many different churches to clean up the neighborhoods and to do some work, some landscaping, some painting. It was a lot of different projects and a lot of different people coming together. I think it's so sweet when you get people coming together from different nations and ethnicities. That's one thing I love about playing right now. Like I play pickup games Saturday mornings, and I just see people gather from all different countries. And there's this bond that happens when you're on the field together. And our church, when I first got there, was predominantly white. And now it's so, you look around, it looks more like our neighborhood. It looks like heaven. It just feels so much better, to have that collaboration. Collaboration happens multi-generationally, I think, too. And there's so much to learn from each other and inspiring examples. So for that to carry out, in a soccer team, when people know their role and they have responsibilities and they work hard on those, and everyone's honing in on their craft and their role. You're talking before about development, and I'd say it's true in soccer. It's true in a lot of things that we're doing. There's first that unconscious incompetence, mean like I don't even know what I don't know, and then it's like conscious incompetence. Okay, now I'm becoming aware of what I need to learn, and I'm starting to get motivated. And then it's conscious competence, which I have to focus on it. Like I'm trying to put the pieces together. It's not going quick. I'm thinking about it, but it's working. It's happening. And then you get to that level where it's unconscious competence. And you think about that, let's just say tying your shoe. My kids, first they didn't know how to do it. And then they started to realize, oh, I need to learn how to do this. And then they focused hard and they could tie their shoe. And now it's like they just put their shoe on, they tie it, and not even thinking about it. And that's true for me with distribution as a goalkeeper, punting, kicking, throwing the ball. That's true in my diving and breakaways. It's like you break it down, you learn it, you grow in it, you practice it, and you become familiar. And when you're on a team where everyone's kind of spurring one another on, and your roles, and kind of where someone likes to pass, what run they like to make, when you cross it, who's going to be there, and you get to know each other so well. It's like the experience grows and the joy grows, and it's exponential. And the old proverb, you go faster alone, you go further together. And I see this in every realm. And collaboration is something that I feel like, we're United States of America, but sometimes we're not as united as we want to be or should be. And I think collaboration is what's going to help us change the culture. And we need each other. You can't describe it any other way than, bottom line, we need each other. And so let's bring out the best in each other. And that's true on the field. When you're in an environment, you say, well, how do you know it's healthy? Like at a workplace, there's different markers for health, but everyone in the room knows like when it's healthy and when it's toxic. And you've got to be someone, I think, who can change a culture, who can step into a mess, change a locker room, change a culture. That's leadership. Find people who are like-minded, share the same values, the same dream, get the right people around you, staff according to your weaknesses, and go with the best idea, empower people, two-way communication, safety, trust. The core of relationships is trust. All these things, that are true in the office are true in the church, that are true on the team as well.
Yeah, you just said like a mini book right there in that last answer. So I will tell you, like, folks, go back and listen to that. There's so much in there. I'm gonna mine it a little bit here. One of the things you talked about is you talked about that idea of from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. I mean, really what you described there is why we practice, right? I mean, if you are on a game and you're either incompetent and not knowing and understanding, or you're having to think about it the whole game, it's too late if you have to think about it in a game, right? Maybe when you're like 7, you can get away with that. But as you go, when you're in college, when you're playing for Dartmouth, if you're thinking every time you get the ball, okay, now I need to remember how to throw the ball, and now I got to go, okay, it would be too late. The defender would be there, right? You have to, boom, you get that ball, you see it, counterattack, you're leading that player, and they're going, right? You can't think, right? And if you're thinking, it's too late. And that's the reality of the soccer field, but also as you talked about in the workplace, in your marriage, in your parenting, right? I mean, if you're having to think, about different things in the middle of that moment, oftentimes, if you haven't already decided, okay, I'm gonna count to 5 before I yell, right?
Yeah.
You count to 5, chances are you won't, right? But if you go on what your instinct is in that moment, chances are it won't be the learned behavior that you want to do, right?
Yeah.
But you talked about that too, knowing all your players, knowing everyone in your organization. That's why we do the disc training. That's why I've just spent, 4 or 5 days away from home training different universities and their soccer teams and the volleyball team that I did. Like, able to understand, you need to study your people.
Yes.
Right? You need to study them and understand who they are, how they're wired, or else you'll make assumptions about them that aren't right, and you also need to know as a keeper, what is the skill set of your outside back, right?
Mhm.
If they aren't at the level, hopefully at college, they're going to be able to handle that ball. But if you give it to them and they don't have good foot skills, you're going to see that ball right back at you down your throat, right? You don't want that. So these are
Yeah.
things that we need to understand, and it does need to be a conscious, competence. I mean, an unconscious competence, or else again, we're not going to be able to do that. But one of the things I do want to camp out on a little bit, you talked about it right there at the end. It's the idea of culture. And it's the
Mhm.
idea if you look around the room and everyone knows it's healthy or toxic, right?
Yeah.
What I want to spend a little bit of time on is um, how, when you have that toxic setting, when you have that toxic culture, there are, maybe a few, maybe it's a group of people, maybe it's one
Yeah.
virus. How
Yeah.
do you work with that virus? What if it gets to the point where it's, you got to cut that virus out? What does that look like in
Yeah.
reality on a team, and in any team, really, in the field or off the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, culture is almost more important than skill and strategy in a lot of
Hmm.
workplaces. And culture is one of those things that's so real, it affects everyone. It's great if you're in an environment where there's clear values. In our team right now, we identified some clear values. And that's going to be, collaboration, common goals. We're going to celebrate victories together. And when you have some of those goals in place, not just on a wall, but then you start to implement, live them out. And it does affect everything. It affects your priorities, affects your decision making. Going back to soccer, it's like each level you climb, the decision making is quicker. You got less space and less time. So you got to make good decisions. And leadership is making good decisions. And the good decisions aren't just numerical, they're relational. And to be able to do both is so important. When a culture's toxic or things are off, it depends for how long and how many people are involved. There are times when you need a whole new staff. There are times where you switch clubs. there are some systemic things that you don't necessarily are going to just overcome those quickly. And the more prolonged it's been, the more deep it is, the more drastic the change has to be. Now, if it's, let's say, one or two people, I remember reading a Bible verse that said, drive out the mocker and out goes the strife. And I was like, drive out the mocker? That doesn't sound Christian. But I'll tell you, you remove one or two people that gossip and slander and like undermine, it's amazing how that culture can change, when that happens. And sometimes it's, one or two people on a team and they might be the most talented, because usually the most talented get away with the most. But all of a sudden, when there's accountability, when there's a standard there, it's like everybody rises. And so even though you lose one talented player or maybe two, when you get the culture healthy again, the collective gain from everyone, relief,
Yeah.
there's no double standards, there's no awkwardness, and now we can just be ourselves and laugh and play. And I mean, it just gets fun again. And so it's going to be worth it. Those are the hard decisions. And if you're, staffing, it's so important to really hire carefully. And, what's the scorecard when you hire? What are you really looking for? And to identify that, because one wrong hire can affect an organization in massive ways. So it's worth, I think, waiting for the person, taking your time and doing it right when you make the hire. So there's a lot of levels there to culture, but I think it's great if it's clear. We say clear communication. It's great if it's written down, agreed upon, and then it's great if it's lived out. And those are some initial steps that you can really think through as you're setting the culture. If you're a leader, I've been in a situation where the culture wasn't good before. And I thought I've got three options. And this was a prayerful decision for me. But do I go after the couple people who are, causing the problems? I'm underneath them and challenge them, and maybe it'll lead to some division, or, it's like, it's going to get messy. And I just didn't feel like that was the right thing. And then I thought, well, can I just totally leave and just start over somewhere? And I didn't feel like that kind of releasing and leaving was the right solution. So I had to learn how to just work as well as I could with them and try to bring slow change to the culture. But I was in there for several years, and it's different. That's why I say it's not a formula. It takes wisdom. I like to pray for wisdom. I just simple prayer, God, please give me wisdom. I'm facing this mess. I don't know how to walk through that. And it's amazing how many times clarity comes after that prayer. But yeah, a lot of different situations and so many different dynamics of where you are in the team. Are you on the bench? Are you a starter? Are you a captain? Are you the coach? Are you assistant coach? Use and you don't have to have an official position to be a leader. Leader is influence. Use your influence as well as you can to influence those people around you. Build on islands of strength. Start to find some people who are like-minded and then run with it. Sometimes you're going to be parallel to the mess, but more people are going to see the health and they're going to start to move over there. And people are going to see the contrast. The contrast is going to grow. So don't lower your standard. Don't drop it just because. Don't be influenced by the junk around you. Don't give into it. It's so easy to just repeat it and imitate it. And then you're doing the very thing you don't like. And so don't fall into that trap. Just take that high road and you'll be surprised how many people are noticing what you're doing. Lead by example. It's going to be even more powerful than your words. People do notice and they respect you for it. They might not thank you right away, but down the road, you're planting pictures in people's minds. You're giving them hope. And that's so important.
Definitely. I mean, it's something I've seen in so many teams. You have the one or two players, and if the coach lets them get away with it, there's, carnage, and there is that wake of destruction behind it, right? There's bodies behind it that are just suffering and struggling. And I love what you said there and I talk to people all the time about this. Everyone on the team is a leader.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care if you're the freshman on that high school team or on the college team. You're leading someone, and you
That's
can
right.
be that leader. If you see that toxicity, you can come into that. And like you said, find those people. Most people will want the healthy culture, if they knew about it. Right. So lead them to say, not create more strife, but to come in and say, this is a better option.
Yes.
Right. If rather than just saying, this is a problem, you guys are terrible, I can't believe you're doing this, offer a better solution, offer a better option that they would want to do, right? That the coach can see. If the coach isn't seeing it, now, if the coach is seeing it, how can you help the coach in bringing that health? I can think on the top of my head, several situations I've talked with just in the last 6 months with different people in unhealthy situations. And, because there is that challenge, and Paul Jobson, who's the co-host of the show at Baylor, we talked about this very thing. And he says, he self-admittedly is saying, I sometimes keep people too long because I think the best of them, which I totally understand. I hate firing people. But if it gets to that point where, as you said, that mocker to say, okay, there's the door.
Yeah.
What do you think I know there's no formula, there's no one right answer,
right?
But at what point is that the answer, rather than, especially as a coach, because we as coaches know that part of our role as a coach is to help our players to flourish, not just on the field, but off the field. Right. So there's that balance too. Right. So how do you know that even in your job now as a pastor? Obviously, if there's people, that's part of your job. It obviously is to help people to flourish. So what does that look like?
Right.
What's that balance?
Yeah, hopefully it's not a surprise for that player or that teammate, that employee. I mean, it should be a situation where it's maybe a first time, a second time, and all along you're giving them every chance. Hey, what do you need? You're doing it in a way that's humble, hopefully asking them questions. Do they understand? Hey, and you're giving them feedback too, direct feedback. That's part of the accountability. Hey, when you say this, I feel this. When you say this, it affects that person that way. When you don't do this, like, this is how it hurts the team. When you do that, that's how it undermines us. And it happens quite often, on teams. And I think, what's ideal? And start there. What are we going for? What's ideal? Okay, how do we get there? You try to get people's input. You try to hear their ideas, and they get ownership that way when they have input. And it's not just like heavy-handed, but it's we're all committed to this team being as good as it can be, right? And you find that common ground, and it's like, well, what's that going to look like on the field and off the field, and like, how do we get there? And try to help people be part of the solution. What I've seen is that sometimes when there's a complaint, it's linked to someone's passion. So someone might come up now and say, I don't think we're doing enough around the community, and I might say, okay, what do you think we should do? And Well, I think we should hand out more free food. I think there's a lot of people starving. Okay, how would we do that? Well, I think we could partner with these groups. Well, are you willing to lead some of that? Yeah, actually I am. I could put that together on Saturday mornings. We got something, so instead of this person complaining to 3 friends, now they're coming directly. If something's off, come to the leader and just share your heart. Say, this is what I'd love to see. And some of those you can turn around. Sometimes you want to take that person out to lunch early on. When someone's not quite buying in or doesn't understand or seems like they're going sideways, spend a little time with that person. Ask them some questions. Questions are disarming, and ask them hey, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Why? You often have to ask people 3 times to really find out how they're doing. How are you doing? Fine. No, how are you really doing? Well, actually it's this. And how are you feeling about that? And then that 3rd time they ask you what's going on. So you don't want if now you have people are taking sides, now there's cliques, now it's trouble. So try to catch it early. And there are going to be times where you need to make changes. You try to transition it well. Hopefully there's clear standards. Hopefully you're communicating with that person several times. But there's just some people that don't have the desire to change, don't have the ability to change. Their feet are dug in. And those are times where you have to make those difficult calls. As a leader, you can't operate in fear. As a parent, you can't operate in fear. And you can't be afraid of certain people. I remember when a coach was afraid of a player. It's like the whole team hit turmoil because the coach was afraid of the player. You can't be afraid of ultimately the consequences. You can't be afraid of, well, if I do the right thing here, what if 3 people don't like me? If you live in that, you're not going to be effective as a leader, and you're not going to be able to create that culture. So it's really a freedom from what people think about you sometimes. And it's just a commitment to doing the right thing in the right way and the right timing too. And leadership, I'll tell you, this has been true during COVID. Before COVID, there was a lot more 90-10, 99-1, 80-20 decisions where I knew 80, 90, 99% of people are going to be happy, and like 5, 10, 20% might not like it. I'll tell you, COVID just leaves us in this pandemic. I mean, people are going to leave if we don't reopen. And then we reopen and people leave because we reopen. And then we say, put on masks, and people leave because we put on masks. And I say, okay, now we can take off masks. People leave to take off masks. And I mean, you just go down the line. It's like anxiety is amped up. People are, very opinionated. And sometimes we just lose our patience and perspective. And leading through those times is a challenge. And so how can you be a non-anxious presence? How can you try to just calmly explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, the why is so important? And then ultimately, I've got to release the results. I'm going to do the right thing as best as I can. If I make a mistake, I've got to own it. Because if a leader makes a mistake, don't just tuck it under or act like everything's fine. They'll say, I blew that, could have done that better. So I've got to own that. But ultimately, I'm going to try to do the right things, communicate it well. And then the results, those I can't control all the time. And I just can't operate in fear.
Yeah. And I just thought about a lot of stuff as you were talking there. And, I think that the idea of just, as you said, owning owning your behavior, owning it. You can't understand, or you can't know what that result's going to be. You don't know. Giving them the opportunity, catching it early. Yes. And I think that there are just times where the people are so, they're really into what they want. It's an individualism, right? It's just a self-focus. And I think sometimes to be able to come in and understand where that unhealth comes from, right? And one of my pastors said, one of my things, I love what he said, what is the lie that you're believing that makes your behavior okay? And it was a very powerful question, right? Because I think that's what's going on in a lot of these instances, is that there is a lie that they're believing. The other thing that you talked about there is the idea that I think helps everything. And it not only helps, I think it's critical in order to have a healthy organization, a healthy team at any level. And I've talked about this before. Patrick Lencioni in the book, The Advantage, talks about healthy teams. And he has the healthy leadership team as the first thing to have, right? Where we know each other, we trust each other, we have the vulnerability, so on and so forth. But then it's create clarity, communicate clarity, reinforce clarity, right? This idea, as you just talked about, to have the clear rules, to have the clear values, to have the clear goals. And then when people are not living up to those values that, you as a team have agreed on together, then it's really an easy decision if they refuse to live up to those values, right? And so that's something that I think you said in there. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's what I heard you saying there, is to have those clear values, live them out. And then at the end of the day, if someone self-selects out, that's effectively what they're doing. They're self-selecting out of that. They don't want to be in that culture. And you know what? That's their prerogative. Chances are it's because they're unhealthy if it's a healthy culture, which is then the right decision for everybody. So what do you think? Do you agree with all that?
Yeah, don't water down the vision. Don't give up or compromise the potential. Don't bring that down to just fit in what the current status is. And I believe we're all influencers. You're a culture changer. It's the old metaphor, but be more of the thermostat than the thermometer. The thermometer just reflects what's in the room. The thermostat, it's all about the change. And that is a difficult road sometimes, to that transformational leadership, to step into teams, to step into environments, workplaces, and be the one who's going to initiate that change. But that's where, we need it on so many levels. We really do right now. And I think that, sports, ultimately soccer, is just a platform for real life. And, I've been in the locker room's first place team, been in locker room's the last place team. And the attitudes, the relationships, it's so different. And we really do need that clarity from job descriptions, role descriptions, what's expected here as well. And then finding the right people is going to be huge. Relationships are ultimately what life is about. Quality of relationships determine the quality of your life. And those relationships, building in that trust, shared experiences, empowering people, giving them on-the-job training, all that is extremely significant. When I think about, some of the changes in soccer in America, what I'm seeing that I think is encouraging on the soccer culture is, MLS is improving. That's an important piece because kids need that picture. Coaching is improving. Those mentors, the principles, the concepts, the things the kids practice early on, it's huge. We need to see kids playing. Now, we were talking before about, skills. We need to see kids playing in the backyard, in the streets, in the garage, in the playgrounds, far beyond practice. It can't just be, during practice. And we need to see some of our best athletes choosing soccer. It can't be the fourth or fifth option. And so these elements, all of this is changing, soccer. And you got to identify those key drivers. What's really going to move us forward? Because we've been talking about men's soccer, moving up. For the women have dominated. The women have been excellent. And we've been talking about the men, going to the next level. We've kind of been stuck for a while. And so you got to identify what's really going to change it in America and then invest in those key things. And it's not whether they've got, like great Nike or Adidas clothes, that's not going to make the difference. There's a lot of things that won't make the difference. And being able to identify those helps you kind of eliminate the sideways energy. And you've got to hone in on a couple things because you can't do everything well. So really clear, what are we all about? How do we get there? Here's the key drivers. Does everyone know the strategy? Let's get everyone's ideas because there's going to be people who have much better ideas than you, and listening to them and going with those ideas is going to be an important part of the process. Let's shape it together, plan in pencil, but we're committed to moving forward. And that's what I hope for American soccer. And then, for the places where you serve, you live, work, learn, or play, bringing that to the table, that's tremendous. That's tremendous. It's when, it's not just going to be a couple of, top executives in American soccer figure a few things out, although you need that, but it's when the people run with it. And the same is true in the church, and the same is true in the marketplace. It's like when you get that high level of ownership and you get that passion, you connect passion and purpose. I mean, that's when the exciting stuff happens.
Yeah, definitely. And, something that you just made me think of there is you talked about U.S. soccer and the men's, and it made me think about identity, right? And, winning teams find ways to win, losing teams tend to find ways to lose, right? And unfortunately, that's the reality. But I want to talk a little bit about identity, not of a team per se, but of us as human beings, right? And I know you talked about earlier on as you were telling your story about the time where, you took the malaria medication and all of a sudden you couldn't play.
Yeah.
And that goes to the core of identity when we as athletes, and you hear this all the time. Someone gets hurt, and then all they knew was that they were a soccer player or a football player or a baseball or about whatever the sport, you name the sport, it's the same
Yep.
story, right? I know my wife, she had 4 knee surgeries in college and she had to stop playing soccer, and then she went through a minor depression. And for
Hmm.
another friend of mine stopped playing soccer, went through a minor depression. I mean, it happens, sometimes major depressions, right? Because it's who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And so I really love for you to talk about right now, that idea of identity and forming
Yeah.
identity and shaping identity in the context of, you have a program online. I forget exactly the
Hmm.
program, might be the series maybe, on
Yeah.
finding and spreading hope. And this is a big part of, is knowing who you are, knowing your identity. But how did that help shape your identity back then, that experience? And how can you encourage others to understand and know their identity and why it's actually important?
I think it's so important for athletes to know that who you are is more important than what you do. And in sports, so often you're graded, even the social approval, the likes, it all comes in based on how well did you play, and what position do you have on the team, how many points, your stats. And even self-worth can be tied to that. And self-worth tied to performance is a trap. It's a performance trap, because if you play well, it can lead to pride. If you don't play well, it can lead to shame. Neither are a good spot to end up in. We're human beings, we're not human doings. And that was a major shift for me. It might sound really basic, and you kind of summarize that quickly, but I'll tell you, for me, when my career ended, I was wrestling with, who am I? And for a lot of people, their sense of worth and peace are linked to what they're doing and how well they're doing it. And it's good to be motivated, it's good to use your gifts, I don't want to diminish that. But I had to make a shift at that point, because I realized I had lost so much. My identity can't be in, school and getting better grades, or just doing better on the athletic field, or even having friends around. Because at that time, I didn't have any of that. I was just fighting for my life and thinking, well, who am I without these things? And so I made a shift. I think your identity is a choice. It's kind of like dropping an anchor. It's like, where are you going to drop that anchor? And for me, it was a shift. And I realized the identity needed to be landing somewhere that's not going to change. I can't lose it going away. And for me personally, that was God's presence and love. And it's like, that's the one thing I still have. I felt like, and it's more important than anything else. And so I'm going to shift my identity there. And when I did that, it was so freeing, because there's already this acceptance, this security, and then operating out of that. I think that's powerful for kids too. And they know they're loved by God, that, because it's important to love yourself and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And those are good things. But there's another source of love from above. And when I discovered that, later in life, and then found my identity there, so many things came out of that that were positive. I was able to forgive people I couldn't forgive before, because again, I was secure, I was forgiven, I was loved. I was able to have this relationship with God and other people where I let them in. Before that, I would just try to do better, perform better. I knew they were interested in the part of my life that was going well, but I thought no one really wanted to come into the pain and the ugliness, and no one was really interested in that. And certainly God wouldn't be. He only wants me to just be intellectually impressive or theologically pray great, or that. But that was so freeing to realize, no, I'm fully loved, and to let people into that part of me, that vulnerable part. That's where connection happens, and that's where relationships get real and go deep. And those were new things to me. I just started to become more grateful. I was literally writing down 10 things I was thankful for every day, instead of focusing on what I lost, what I still have. And some of these shifts happened out of that identity shift. And that is one of those foundational shifts. And we have a lot of levels to our identity. We have a family, we have a place of origin, sometimes we have a job, and we link those. But I'll tell you, those aren't the deepest places to land your identity. And so I'm just encouraging anyone that's watching, because performance is a roller coaster that goes up and down, and it's a cruel place to try to land your identity. And it's just so freeing when you get off that thing, and you just have peace. And so that's something that they're not going to necessarily teach you in school, but I don't think there's many things that are more important in life than that as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You hit it on the head there, as far as it's not your performance, it's not what you do. Because if that's it, then that's going to fail you. That's going to fail, right? I mean, anything that is based on our performance It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be lasting, right? Because our bodies will get old, our bodies will age, and we're not going to be able to play a game our whole life. There will be something after. So what is that identity grounded in? Hopefully you're able to figure that out while you're playing and not just after you've crashed hard somewhere
Yeah.
and hit bottom. There is a way to do it before you hit there, right? And that's the hope and prayer, is that you're able to do that. So that's one area that I wanted to touch on too. But the other is, as you were playing, as you're leading, as you're seeing, and going into today, and all the way through, the idea of servant leadership, and the idea of going back to healthy cultures. Healthy cultures have a lot of servant leaders. I mean, it just is. Greatest leaders need to be great followers too, right? And know how to do that well. But what does that look like? What did that look like playing? And how does it look like today in your life?
Yeah. You were touching on it earlier, where it's so easy to be self-consumed. It's so easy to be me-centered or me first. And ultimately that's destructive. It's kind of misleading, because at first it feels good. It's like, yeah, all about me. What do I want? Ooh, I got what I want. But then you kind of realize, like, oh, generosity is better than hoarding. Or, you start to realize, like, later on, like, this isn't as good as it first appeared. And we live in a culture where sociologists say, they just don't see many cultures that there's so much isolation, so much loneliness, and then so much self-promotion. And you see it in so many different areas. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to have social media accounts or personal branding. You can use that for good. I'm not saying it's wrong to have money. You can use that for good. It's tremendous blessing. So there's a lot of things that, if we understand that we steward them but don't own them, I'm taking care of this for a time, so I'm going to steward this as well as I can. Basically, I didn't come into the world with anything, and I'm not going to leave with anything. There's not a big U-Haul on your way out of this earth. So I've got this limited amount of time. And so how am I going to invest my time, my talents, my treasures? What are the relationships that are most important? And how can I serve? When you take an approach, and instead of thinking, what could you give me? But instead, how could I serve you? Like, when a group of people have that mentality, there's no limits to what can be done to transform communities, neighborhoods, teams, different marketplace settings. And it's contagious. It's taught and it's caught. When you see it lived out, that's what you want to do. When I had a coach who his whole life was that, it wasn't just in one arena, but his whole life was lived that way. And then he would say, it's the wee things. It's how you do the little things. And we'd watch him do the little things right. And then it was almost like, how do we not follow that example? How do we not do that? And it's countercultural. What is more common is, how can I get mine? How can I get more? How can I ultimately make it about me and check all my boxes to make me happy? And it's a shift in America so often to go from me to we. When I lived in Africa and Zimbabwe, there was so much generosity. There was so much community. There was so much kindness. And the people didn't have much money. There was drought. There was AIDS. There was famine. There was corruption. And yet they rose above it. And I thought, hospitality is not about how much you have in your home. It's about what you have in your heart. And if you truly care for people and have compassion, it doesn't matter what's in your bank account. It doesn't matter what kind of clothes you wear. When you have that mentality to serve, this is what's going to happen is you help other people experience, the best things in life. I often say, I'm just a thirsty guy who discovered some living water and want to help other guys, and ladies find living water. When you start to set people up for success, if you want to serve people, when you help them to realize their potential, you're going to end up kind of discovering your purpose along the way. And when you give, it just so often you're the one who ends up receiving. You teach, you end up being the one who learns. And when your mindset is to help and serve other people, then people want to rally around that and be a part of that. So, don't ignore your own needs, set boundaries, all of those healthy practices, all those best practices. But and sometimes people might misunderstand your motive too, or might be harsh towards you, throw shade, and it's not accurate. Sometimes you do need to build up your resume to get into, or GPA to get into a college, or so it's not like you just ignore yourself. But instead of just focusing on yourself, you're focusing on other people and you're serving them well. And when you do that, that's when you really come alive. That's what you're actually made to do, is to serve other people. And you might just think through, if you're listening today, like, who do you want to help? What solutions do you bring? What talents do you have? What good thoughts do you have in the morning and at night? Kind of those good burdens where you just feel like maybe it's an individual or a group of people where you can make a difference. Maybe it's overseas. Maybe it's clean water. We're on a path right now. In our church, we ran half marathon, and we're on a path right now. World Vision is doing a tremendous job of providing clean water for everyone by 2030. I mean, it's improved about 50% over the last 20 years. So there are so many opportunities. I'm so grateful to be alive in 2021. I almost died a long time ago, but I'm so grateful to be alive because I feel like we've never had more resources. I mean, from podcasts like this to videos that we make to social media to connecting with people. I mean, I'm just amazed that, like, I'll follow someone, they'll follow back. Now we're having a conversation. Now it's collaboration. Now we're making a difference together. And it just all happens like, bing, bing, bing. And now lives are changed. And I just love that. I love being alive in that environment. And so, just think clearly as you can about who you can serve. At the end of your life, what do you want to be said true about how you lived? And that's going to be serving. Or if money was no factor, who would you serve? What would that look like? And those are ways to help identify some of that passion that you have and some of that purpose that can surface and that you can start to run with now. And just start small. Don't despise small beginnings, and watch what it can grow into.
Yep. And I will say what you alluded to and said there, you'll find your greatest joy when you're figuring out how you can serve and help others to flourish. You've heard on the show, if you've listened to more than a few episodes, that my purpose, my why is to help others to flourish and make good things better, right? And that's when I learned that I could actually do what I love to do and help others. And that's when I just really felt like, okay, there is a joy there that is so far and above just seeking, whether it's money, whether it's your own acclaim, whether it's whatever it is. There was a time where I wanted to be up on stage all the time and be, that guy that's traveling and doing this and that and the other thing. And I realized, you know what? That's not nearly as fulfilling as being able to really dive into lives and be able to help people, as a coach, as a dad, right? As, to be able to know those platforms. So on that note, what is your personal why, your purpose, and how are you living that out every day?
Yeah. And Phil, I think this podcast is just what you're talking about, where you start it because you enjoy sports, you want to connect with different coaches, athletes, parents. And then out of that, you're already serving orphans so well around the world. And then now it starts to combine and you see the potential with athletes and orphans, and it just starts to grow. And I believe some of the greatest things in life are not planned, but you just start serving people and making a difference. And then look what you step into. I know a guy that during COVID just wanted to start, giving people food who needed food. Simply, that was his desire. He works full time. He's got, kids, a family, a wife. And now he's given out almost 20 million pounds of food, and he's built teams, during the pandemic. So there's just no limits when you go down that road. And I think faith is part of it too. I love to spread hope, and I love to spread the hope of Jesus is what changed my life. I don't know anyone that brings more hope than Jesus. And that relationship, it's based on grace. It's not earned. It's not rules, religion, rituals. This is a relationship, grace, an undeserved gift. And just enjoying that relationship has brought me so much hope. And I think there's a hope in just living like Jesus. And I think hope is something that, is gritty. It's not just wimpy. I think there's a foundation for our lives with hope. It's not just, kind of comes and goes randomly, but I think it's attached to this foundation, a house on a rock, not a house in the sand. And I love it when people experience hope. I think you can have hope and grief at the same time. It doesn't mean that you don't feel pain, but we need more hope. The Census Bureau said that during the pandemic, 48% of Americans feel hopeless. And this is a time where I think that finding and spreading hope is significant. And I love to do that, even just whether it's local and meeting needs. We've got an event at our church this Friday where this weekend, actually Saturday morning, we're putting, things together Friday, and then it's Saturday where hundreds of families will come to the church and just build relationships. They'll get to take anything they want. And we just have massive amounts of supplies and resources. And I just love to see, the faces, the hope, just through an event like that. I digitally, different opportunities. We built a website, jessebradley.org, if you want to go there. Love to connect with anyone, social media as well, but we just put out free resources. We've got videos on marriage because half the marriages in our country are ending in divorce. We need hope for marriage. And so we put together a video course for that. And then there's lots of different topics: hope for the future, habits that lead to hope, foundation of hope, practical roadmap for hope. But you can discover it on the website. And again, just love to connect with anyone that's listening too.
Yeah, those are some great resources. I haven't gone through all of them in preparation for this, but
Didn't
quite a
expect you
few of
to.
them, quite a few of
Yeah.
them, and they are solid stuff. So we will have that on the show notes as well. But it's jessebradley.org. Pretty easy to remember. Um, Now we have our last couple questions that we ask everybody. So I'd love to hear your responses to this, as I'm sure some people listen to the show look forward to these questions every time too. But the first one is, what did you learn? What have you learned directly from the game of soccer? That you use in your marriage and parenting. And the example that I always use is retaliator gets the red, right? Like that idea of, with my kids, that, hey, if you're fighting and they say, well, he started, well, you know what? The retaliator gets the red, right? So don't
Mhm.
escalate, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily fair. Now with VAR, of course, that's not as accurate. They always call me on that now, but we don't have VAR in our life. But anyway, so what is something that you've taken directly from the game that you use in your marriage, parenting?
In the game, I was very competitive and wanted to win. And I think it's important to recognize what is winning in different settings, and that you're really chasing the right goal. And that's so important. And I think winning, let's say there's conflict in the marriage, winning isn't trying to prove you're right and the other person wrong and take them down and you prevail. So that's where it could really go sideways. But winning is actually connecting. It's staying united in marriage. That's the win. So what's it going to take to win? I think for me, some of that competitive drive, and my wife and I have different strengths, and I'm so grateful for her. She is so honed into the details. And sometimes I'm big picture, which can help, but sometimes like I got to get my act together and like get in there and figure out like this assignment or this teacher or get a ride to this game or practice. And so like I got to keep entering into details, and I'm so grateful she's so strong at that. Just like a team, different strengths and complement each other. But I was thinking that I think there's a competitive drive in me to have a healthy family. And I think that's the win. And, I mentioned my parents got divorced when I was growing up. It's like, okay, how could I have, by God's grace, a healthy marriage? Or how could my kids have things that I didn't have? And I think it's shifting. My drive is there. I mean, it's just strong. That's who I am. It's not going to go away. I'm just not a passive guy. I'm just not a, let's just see what happens kind of guy. Like I'm intentional, I'm going for it. That's how I'm wired. But I've got to identify the right win and then figure out what it's going to look like to get there. And part of that is guarding that healthy culture in the family. I think that's what's been clear.
Yeah, that's great. I've talked a lot about that recently, is especially with very task focused, driven, outgoing people. They need results, they need wins, they're super competitive. And sometimes we need to redefine that win. We need to redefine that result that we're getting. Otherwise, we'll be discontent all the time and unhealthy all the time. And so
Yeah.
totally get that. And that's something that again, even going back to that why, to know your why, that's really what is your goal. That's what are you, we talked about writing your eulogy, to understand, as you talked about, what is that at the end of your life you want people to say
Mm-hmm.
about you. And
Yeah.
that idea, that's really your win. If you hit that, that's your win. So to know that
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you'll just be, as they say, that old adage of don't, make sure your ladder's on the right building, right? So
Yeah.
if you don't know what building you're even trying to climb,
Yeah.
then it's really hard to know whether it's a win. You're going to let the world define what a win is, and that's never a good
It,
thing.
and what a hollow feeling to spend your whole life climbing a ladder and then near the end realize it's the wrong ladder, it's the wrong building,
Exactly.
And I'll tell you, there's a lot of pastors, there's a lot of driven people, there's a lot of business leaders who just want to take the next mountain. And I rarely hear at the end of life, and I've been around a lot of people at the end of their lives, I've rarely heard someone say, oh, I wish I would have worked a little more. Yeah. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of people that say, oh, investing in the family and having better family relationships, that's where they would have adjusted. So hopefully that helps me, helps us. We're lifelong learners. Parenting stretches all of us, and it's an opportunity to grow. There's no greater opportunity to grow. I mean, the person who's going to help you grow the most is the person you're married to. They know you the best, that those differences. But I'll let you go back to your question.
We can, like we said, we could talk for days on all these things, but
This is true.
the last question we got, and we'll wrap it up here. What have you read, listened to, or watched that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
Yeah. I'm someone who's always been relational, intuitive, learned by experience. And so, I feel like I haven't picked up something better than the coach I had in college, and I felt like anything was safe to talk about. And I felt like you could go into his office, talk about life, talk about soccer, talk about your playing time, and it would be a great conversation. And also he had a way of creating this family feel. And, sometimes we throw that around like, oh, this church is a family, or this business is a family, or, whatever team it is, pick your favorite team, the Sounders family. And sometimes we throw that around kind of loosely, and it's not really the case. It's really not family.
Yeah.
And when you actually get an experience that is family, I'm still emailing, Zoom, getting together with, I've got an opportunity to talk to the Dartmouth men's soccer team's going to play the Huskies, University of Washington. And I get a chance to talk to the team here in another week or so. And I mean, that's just what stands out to me is that family that's created. And when you get a taste of that, you don't want to settle for less, and when you get a taste of that on the field, like you want to experience that and create that in other settings. And sometimes, honestly, that was hard for me in the church, because I thought, man, on the soccer team, like we got along well, we went all out, and it was just for some rings, that was the goal. And I thought, in church, like we're actually seeing lives change. Like, why would we kind of go halfway, or why would we have petty conflict? Like, if we could figure it out in the soccer locker room, like let's do this in other arenas too. So trying to carry that over. But I think that's probably what stood out to me the most. But then I see it in different teams. It's like when Liverpool just had their great run, and you listen to the players, listen to the coach. I know I watched Allison, anytime there's another goalkeeper that loves Jesus, it's like, okay, you got my attention. And I'm watching Firmino get baptized on a road trip, in pool. And I'm just thinking, like, it just looks like family to me. They score a goal, it looks like family. It doesn't look professional. It's got all those elements, but it's like it transcends. And honestly, it's almost harder in the professional level to create that family feel than the college. And high school, I think, is even easier in some ways. But the more you go up, to create that family feel, there's just a joy and a connection and a trust and a closeness. And to me, that's where life's at its best. You're not going to find anything greater than love. And when a coach can bring that and lead the team into that, man, that's top-notch stuff.
Yep. I totally agree. And it pains me to say how much I enjoyed watching that with Allison and Firmino and even Allison scoring the goal last season, whatever, that was phenomenal. As a Manchester United supporter, it's really hard for me to like anything that ever happens at Liverpool. But I have made an exception for that. That's okay, and I can say it actually in public and not feel like I've completely ruined my credibility as a United supporter. So some things transcend sport, right?
Yeah.
So that's absolutely or affinities, maybe not sport, but of affinities.
Right.
So anyway, well, thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for this time together today. I very much appreciate you and what you've shared today.
Enjoyed it, Phil. A little jab at the Red Devils, but I just have to say, I appreciate what you're doing with orphans. It's far more significant than soccer. Our family, we adopted a child. It just means the world to me anytime someone's working with orphans. And so just keep up the good work. And I'm so thankful anyone who made it to the end of this podcast. We went long, but just thanks for sticking with us and look forward to connecting. So thanks so much, Phil.
Yeah, thank you. And then thank you everyone out there for, as you said, this download, for listening to this. And I just hope that you are learning right alongside me, and just really learning from these great people that we get to talk with. So with that, I just again want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and rate and review this show. Apple Podcast, wherever else you're listening, go ahead and do that. Join us on Facebook at the How Soccer Explains Leadership Facebook group. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram and wherever else you do your social media. But most importantly, I do hope that you're taking what you're learning here and you're using it to help you be a better leader. You're using it to continually remind you that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.